Hello everyone, welcome to My Fluency Journey. And in this video and this live session, we are reading a book which is this Sapiens. And today's chapter is The Wheels of Industry, right? Okay, yeah, now we'll start. So, yeah, so the chapter is The Wheels of Industry, and then the internal topic is the age of shopping. The modern capitalist economy must constantly increase production is if it is to survive, like a shark that must swim or suffocate. Yet it's not enough to produce. Somebody must also buy the products, or industrialists and investors like will go bust. To prevent this catastrophe, or to make sure that people will always buy whatever new stuff industry produces, a new kind of ethic appeared: consumerism. What is consumerism? It is known as when persons are buying so many things it doesn't require. They are not unnecessary or necessary to them, right? Most people throughout history lived under conditions of scarcity. Frugality was thus their watchword. The austere ethics of the Proteans and Spartans are but two famous examples. A good person avoided luxuries, never threw food away, and patched up torn trousers instead of buying a new pair. Only kings and nobles allowed themselves to renounce such values publicly and conspicuously flaunt their riches. Consumerism sees the consumption of even more products and services as a positive thing. It encourages people to treat themselves, spoil themselves, and even kill themselves slowly by overconsumption. So, means overconsumption of things, right? Frugality is a disease to be cured. You don't have to look far to see the consumer ethic in action. Just read the back of the cereal box. Here's a quote from the box of one of my favorite breakfast cereal, produced by Israeli farm Telma. Sometimes you need a treat, sometimes you need a little action. There are times to watch your weight and times when you just go have something. Right now, Telma offers a variety of tasty cereals just for you, treats without remorse. The same package sports an ad for another brand of cereal called Health Treats. Health Treat offers a lot of grains, fruits, and nuts for an experience that combine taste, pleasure, and health. For an enjoyable treat in the middle of the day, suitable for a healthy lifestyle, a real treat with the wonderful taste of more. Emphasis in the original. Throughout most of history's people, Throughout most of history, people were likely to be repelled rather than attracted by such a text. They would have branded it as selfish, decadent, and morally corrupt. Decadent. Ex- Excessively rich or excessively indulgent. Corrupt. Okay. Consumerism has worked very hard. With the help of popular psychology, just do it. To convince people that indulgence is for you, whereas frugality is self oppression. It has succeeded. We are all good consumers. We buy countless products that we don't really need and that until yesterday we didn't know existed. This is what consumerism and it kills the persons. Manufacturers deliberately design short-term goods and invent new unnecessary model of perfectly satisfactory product that we must purchase in order to stay in. Shopping has become a fluid pastime and consumer goods have become essential mediator in the relationship between family members, spouse and friends. Religious holidays such as Christmas have become shopping festival. In the United States, even Memorial Day, originally a solemn day for remembering fallen soldiers, is now an occasion for special sales. Most people mark this day by going shopping, perhaps to prove that the defender of freedom did not die in vain. The flowering of the consumeristic ethic is manifested most clearly in the food market. Traditional agricultural societies lived in the awful shade of starvation. In the affluent world of today, one of the leading health problems is obesity, which strikes the poor, who stuff themselves with their hamburgers and pizzas, even more severely than the rich, who eat organic salads and fruit smoothies. Each year, the US population spends more on diets than the pounds needed to feed all the hungry people in the rest of the world. Obesity is a double victory for consumerism. Instead of eating little, which will lead to economic contraction, people eat too much and then buy diet products contributing to economic growth twice over. How how can we square the consumeristic ethic with the capitalist ethic of the business person? According to which profit should not be wasted and should instead be reinvested in production. It's simple. As in previous eras, there is today a division of labor between the elite and the masses. In medieval Europe, aristocrats spent their money carelessly on extravagant luxuries, whereas peasants lived frugally. Extravagant means very expensive or means फालतू का खर्चा, right? Extravagant means nonsensical luxuries. Extravagant, very rich, and spending too much money, too many resources. Lavish lifestyle. Today the tables have turned. The rich take great care managing their assets and investments while the less well he'll go into debt buying cars and televisions he don't really need. The capitalist and the consumerist ethics are two sides of the same coin, a merger of two commandments. The supreme commandment of the rich is invest, and the supreme commandment of the rest of us is buy. So we should invest rather than buy, right? We don't have to become a consumerism. Don't fall into the trap of these companies, right? You need to be take care of yourself and don't buy this fucking careless things which you don't need. For example, Spotify Premium, YouTube Premium, and these chips, popcorns, diet foods. Why are you taking these? Just eat simple homemade food, right? The capitalist consumerist ethic is revolutionary in another respect. Most previous ethical systems presented people with a pretty tough deal. They were promised paradise, but only if they cultivated compassion and tolerance, overcame craving and anger, and restrained their selfish interests. This was too tough for most. The history of ethics is sad tale of wonderful ideals that nobody can live up to. Most Christians did not intimate Christ, most Buddhists failed to follow Buddha, and most Confucians would have caused Confucius a temper tantrum. In contrast, most people today successfully live up to the capitalist consumerist ideal. The new ethic promise the new ethic promises paradise on condition that the rich remain greedy and spend their time making more money, and that the masses give free rein to their craving and patience. Okay, the rich remains greedy and spend their time making more money, and the masses give free rein to their craving and patience, and buy more and more. This is the first religion in history whose followers actually do what they are asked to do. How though do we know that we'll get paradise in return? We have seen it on television. Now we are reading the next chapter, which is a permanent revolution. So what we learn in this chapter is about capitalism and consumerism. Industrial revolution. Okay, the next chapter is a permanent revolution. The Industrial Revolution opened up new ways to convert energy and to produce goods, largely liberated humankind from its dependence on surrounding ecosystem. Human cut down forests, drained swamps, dammed rivers, flooded land, laid down tens of thousands of kilometers of railroad tracks, and built skyscraping metropolises. As the world was molded into fit the needs of Homo sapiens, habitats were destroyed and species went extinct. Our once green and blue planet has become a concrete and a plastic shopping center. Today the Earth continues Today, the Earth continents are home to almost 7 billion sapiens. If we took all these people and put them on a large set of scales, their combined mass would be about 300 million tons. And currently, we are not 7 million, we are in the reach to we have reached to 8 million, 8 billion peoples, right? 8 billion Homo sapiens, right? 8 billion Homo sapiens. So yeah, if you then took all our domesticated farm yard animals, cows, pigs, sheep, and chickens, and then place them on an even larger set of scale, their masses would almost be about 700 million. In contrast, the combined mass of all surviving large wild animals from porcupines and penguins to elephants and whales is less than 100 million tons. Our children books, our iconography and our TV screens are still full of giraffes, wolves and chimpanzees, but the real world has very few of them left. There are about 80,000 giraffes in the world compared to 1.5 billion cattle. Only 2 lakh wolves compared to 400 million domesticated dogs. Only 2 lakh 50,000 chimpanzees in contrast to billion of humans, right? Humankind really has taken over the world. We completely destroyed the world and we completely extincted the majority of species. I think this is just due to the survival, and this is just a biology, or there is just a science behind it, right? We can't do nothing about by changing a one person mindset. We need to change the entire Homo sapien mindset. But it is deeply enrooted, it is deeply enrooted in our human minds and unconscious mind that to survive we need to kill the animals. But we have reached far more ahead without any genetic changes, so that we can't change it uh, because this is we have reached at this stage not by evolution. We just reached this evolution by ours, just one revolution, which is cognition revolution, right? Ecological degradation is not the same as resource scarcity. As we saw in the previous chapter, the resources available to humankind are constantly increasing and are likely to continue to do so. That's why doomsday prophecies of resource scarcity are probably misplaced. In contrast, the fear of ecological degradation is only too well founded. The future may see sapiens gaining control of cornucopia of new material and energy sources, while simultaneously destroying what remains on the natural habitat and driving most other species to extinction. In fact, ecological turmoil might endanger the ecological turmoil might endanger the survival of Homo sapien itself. Global warming, rising oceans, and widespread pollution could make the Earth less hospitable to our kind, and the future might consequently see a spiraling race between human power and human-induced natural disasters. As humans use their powers to counter the forces of nature and subjugate the ecosystem to their needs and whims, they might cause more and more unanticipated and dangerous side effects. These are likely to be controllable only by even more drastic manipulation of the ecosystem, which would result in even worse chaos. Many call this process the destruction of nature, but it's not really a destruction, it's a change. Nature cannot be destroyed. 65 million years ago, an asteroid wiped out the dinosaurs, but in so doing, opened the way forward for mammals. Today, humankind is driving many species into extinction and might even annihilate itself. Might even annihilate, right? Annihilate means destroy something completely. So yeah, we can annihilate. But other organisms are doing quite well. Rat and cockroaches, for example, are in their heyday. These tenacious creatures would probably creep out from beneath the smoking rubble of a nuclear Armago- Armageddon, ready and able to spread their DNA. Perhaps 65 million years from now, intelligent rats will look back gratefully on the decimation brought by humankind, just as we today can thank dinosaur busting asteroid. This tenacious would probably creep out of. Okay, tenacious. Tenacious. Very small, right? Okay. From stubborn, jiddi. Still, the rumors of our own extinction are premature to exit. Since the Industrial Revolution, the world's human population has burgeoned, expanding. In 1700, the world was home to some 700 million humans. In 1800, there were 950 million of us. By 1900, we are almost double our numbers to 1.6 billion, and by 2000, that quadrupled to 6 billion. Today, they are just shy of 7 billion sapiens. The next topic is modern time. While all these sapiens have grown increasingly im- impervious to the whims of nature, they have become even more subject to the dictates of modern industry and government. The Industrial Revolution opened the way to a long line of experiments in social engineering and a longer series of unpremeditated changes in the daily life and human mentality. Impervious is no longer substance to pass through, impenetrable, increasingly unaffected, immune to whims, whims of nature. Unpredictable, uncontrollable natural events. Poetic phrase that refers to unpredictable, uncontrollable natural events. Okay, one example among many is the replacement of rhythms of traditional agriculture with the uniform and precise schedule of industry. Traditional agriculture depended on the cycles of natural time and organic growth. Most societies were unable to make precise time measurements, nor were they terribly interested in doing so. The world went about its business with clocks and timetables, subject only to movement of the sun and the growth cycle of plants. There was no uniform working day, and all routine changed drastically from season to season. People knew where the sun was and was essentially for portents for the rainy seasons and harvest time, but they did not know the hour and the hardly care about the year. If a lost time traveler popped up in the medieval village and asked a passerby what is, the villager would be bewildered by the question as the stranger's ridiculous clothing. By the stranger's ridiculous clothing. In contrast to the medieval peasants, a shoemaker, modern industry cares little about the sun of the season. It sanctifies precision and uniformity. For example, in a medieval workshop, each shoemaker made an entire shoe from sole to buckle. If one shoemaker was late for work, it did not stall the others. However, in the modern footwear industry, assembly line, every worker mends every worker mends a machine that produces just a small part of the shoe, which is then passed on the next machine. If the worker who operates machine number 5 has overslept, it stole all other machines. In order to prevent such calamities, everybody must adhere to a precise timetable. Each worker arrives at work at exactly the same time. Everybody takes their lunch break together, whether they are hungry or not. Everybody goes home when a whistle announces that shift is over, not when they have finished the project. The Industrial Revolution turned the timetable and the assembly line into a temple for almost all human activities. Shortly after factories imposed their time frames on human behavior, schools too adopted precise timetables, followed by hospitals, government offices, and grocery stores. When in places devoid of assembly lines and machines, the timetable became king. How timetable became. Use of timetable. If the shift at the factory ends at 5 pm, the local pub had better to open for business by 5 too. A crucial link in the sprint timetable was public transportation. If worker needed to start their shift by 8, the train or bus had to reach the factory gate by 7:15. A few minutes delay would lower production and perhaps even lead to a layoffs the unfortunate latecomers. In 1784, a carriage service with the published schedule began operating in Britain. Its timetable specified only the hours of departure, not arrival. Back then, each British city and town had its own local time, which could differ from London time by time up by two and half an hour. When it was 12 in London, it was perhaps 12:20 in Liverpool and 11:15 in Canterbury. Since there was no telephones, no radio and television, and no fast trains, who could know and who cared? The first commercial train service began operating between Liverpool and Manchester in 1830. 10 years later, the first train timetable was issued. The trains were much faster than the old carriages, so the quickly differences in the local hours became a severe nuance, 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 irritant. In 1847, British train companies put their heads together and agreed that henceforth all train timetables should be calibrated to Greenwich Observatory time rather than the local time of Liverpool, Manchester, or Glasgow. More and more institutions followed the lead of the train companies. Finally, in 1880s, the British government took the unprecedented step of legislating that all timetables in Britain must follow Greenwich. For the first time in history, the country adopted a national time and obliged its population to live according to an artificial clock rather than local ones or sunrise to sunset cycles. This modest beginning spawned a global network of timetables synchronized down to the tiniest fraction of a second. When the broadcast media first radio then television made their debut, they entered a world of timetables and became its men enforcers and evangelists. Among the first seen radio station broadcasts were time signals, beeps that enabled far-flung settlements and ships at sea to set their clocks. Later, radio stations adopted the custom of broadcasting the news every hour. Nowadays, the first time of every news broadcast more important even than the outbreak of war is the time. During the Second World War, BBC News was broadcast to Nazi-occupied Europe. Each news program opened with a live broadcast of Big Bang tolling in the hour, the magical sound of freedom. Ingenious German physicists found a way to determine the weather condition in London based on the time differences in the tone of the broadcast ding-dongs. This information offered invaluable help to the Luftwaffe. When the British Secret Service discovered this, they replaced the broadcast with a set of recording of the famous clock. In order to run the timetable network, cheap but precise portable clocks becomes ubiquitous, necessary, ubiquitous. So ubiquitous means widespread, omnipresent, or omnipresent. It's universal. In Assyrian, Sassanid or Inca cities, there might have been at most a few sundials. In Europe, medieval cities, there are usually a single clock, a giant machine mounted on the top of a high tower and the strong square. These tower clocks were notoriously inaccurate, but since there were no other clocks in town to contradict them, it hardly made any difference. Today, a single affluent family generally has more timepieces at home than an entire medieval country. You can tell the time by looking at your wristwatch, glancing at your underwear, peering at the alarm clock by your bed, gazing at the clock on the kitchen wall, staring at the microwave, catching a glimpse of the TV or DVD, or taking the taskbar of your computer out of the corner of your eye. You need to make a conscious effort not to know what time it is. The typical person consults these clocks several dozen times a day because almost everything we do has to be done on time. An alarm clock wakes us up at wakes us wake us at 8 wakes us up at 7 a.m. We heat our frozen bagel for exactly 50 seconds in the microwave, brush our teeth for 3 minutes until the electric toothbrush we catch the 7:40 train to work, run on the 10-minute gym until the beeper announces that half an hour is over, sit down in front of the TV at 7 p.m. to watch our favorite show, get interrupted at preordained moments by a commercial that costs $1,000 per second, and eventually unload our all angst on a therapist who restricts our detail to the now standard 50-minute therapy hour. The Industrial Revolution brought about dozens of major upheavals in human society. Adapting to industrial time is just one of them. Other notable examples include urbanization. Okay, urbanization. Disappearance of the peasantry, the rise of industrial proletarians, and the empowerment of the common person, democratization, youth culture, and the disintegration of patriarchy. Yet all of these upheavals are throughout by the most momentous social revolution that ever befell humankind. The collapse of the family and the local community and their replacement by state and the market. Okay. As best we can tell from the earliest times, more than a million years ago, humans lived in small, intimate communities, most of which, most of whose members were kin. The cognitive revolution and the agricultural revolution did not change that. They glued together families and communities to create tribes, cities, kingdoms, and empires. But families and communities remained the basic building blocks of all human societies. The Industrial Revolution, on the other hand, managed with a little more than 2 centuries to break these building blocks into atoms. Most of the traditional function of families and communities were handed over to states and markets. Oh, so Industrial Revolution completely changed the human society, the structure of human societies. Let's break down into the atoms. While cognition revolution and the agricultural revolution are just a part of that industrial revolution, right? Because cognition revolution gives humans to think beyond the realities, beyond the subjective reality or beyond the objective reality. They are able to think in a new dimension. They are able to create imagined realities. So yeah, just like empires, religions, states, national nationals. The collapse of family and the community. The next topic is this. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, the daily life of most humans when it scores within three ancient forms: the nuclear family, the extended family, and the local intimate community. Most people work in the family business, the family farm, or the family workshop, for example, or they work in their neighbor's family businesses. The family was also the welfare system, the health system, or the education system, the construction industry, the trade union, the pension fund, the insurance company, the radio, the television, the newspaper, the bank, even the police. When a person fell sick, the family took care of her. When a person grew old, the family supported her. Her children were her children were her pension fund. When a person died, the family took care of her orphans. If a person wanted to build a hut, the family lent a hand. If a person wanted to open a business, the family raised the necessary money. If a person wanted to marry, the family chose or at least waited the prospective spouse. If conflict arose with a neighbor, the family muscled in. If a person's illness was too grave for the family to manage, or a new business demanded too large an investment, or a neighborhood quarrel escalated to the point of violence, the local community came to rescue. I think it's not gone in India. It's still there in India. It's not. But on the verge of extinction, right? Oblivion, right? On the verge of oblivion. The community offered help on the basis of local tradition and economy of favor, which often differed greatly from the supply and demand laws of the free market. In an old-fashioned medieval community, when my neighbor was in need, I helped build his hut and guard sheep without expecting any payment in return. When I was in need, my neighbor returned the favor. At the same time, the local potentate might have trusted all of us villagers to construct his castle without paying us a penny. In exchange, we counted on him to defend us against brigands and barbarians. Village life involved many transactions but few payments. There were more markets, of course, but their roles were limited. You could buy spices, clothes, and tools, and hire the service of lawyer and doctor. Yes, less than 10% of commonly used products and services. Yes, less than 10% of commonly used products and services were bought in the market. Most human needs were taken care of by the family and the community. Okay, let's drink some water. There were also kingdoms and empires that performed important tasks such as waging wars, building roads, and constructing places. For these purposes, kings raised taxes and occasionally enlisted soldiers and laborers. Yet, with few exceptions, they tended to stay out of the daily affairs of families and communities, even if they wanted to intervene. Most kings could do so only with a difficulty. Traditional agricultural economies had few surpluses with which to feed crowds of government officials, policemen, social workers, teachers, and doctors. Consequently, most did not develop mass welfare systems, healthcare systems, or education systems. They left such matters in the hand of families and communities. Even on rare occasions when ruler tried to intervene most intensively, in the daily lives of peasantry, as happened, for example, in the Qin Empire in China. They did by so converting family heads and community elders into government agents. Often enough, transportation and communication difficulties made it so complicated to intervene in the affair of remote communities that many kingdoms prefer to cede even the most basic royal prerogative, to cede even the most basic royal prerogatives, okay, to give up. Such as taxation and violence to communities. The Royal Ottoman, or the Ottoman Empire, for instance, allowed family vendates to mete out mete out justice rather than supporting a large imperial police force. If my cousin killed somebody, the victim's brother might kill me in sanctioned revenge. The Sultan in Istanbul or even the provincial pasha did not intervene in such clashes as long as violence remained within acceptable limits. In the Chinese Ming Empire, in 1368 to 1644, the population was organized into a Baojia system, Baojia system. 10 families were grouped to form a Jia, and then 10 Jia constitute a Bao. When a member of a Bao committed a crime, other Bao member could be punished for it, in particular the Bao elders. Taxes were to levied on the Bao, and it was the responsibility of the Bao elders rather than of the state official to assess the situation of each family and determine the amount of tax it should pay. From the empire's perspective, this system had a huge advantage. Instead of maintaining thousands of revenue officials and tax collectors who would have to monitor the earnings and expenses of every family, these tasks were left to community elders, and the elders knew how much each villager was worth, and they usually enforced tax payments without involving the imperial army. Many kingdoms and empires were into little more than large protection rackets. The king was the Capo di Tutti Capi, who collected protection money and in return made sure that neighboring crime syndicates and local families did not harm those under his protection. He did little else. Life in the blossom of family and community was far from ideal. Families and communities could oppress their members no less brutally than do modern states and markets, and their internal dynamics were often fraught with tension and violence. Yet people had little choice. A person who lost a family and community around 1750 was as good as a dead. She had no job, no education, no support in times of sickness and distress. Nobody would loan her money for a defend her if she got into trouble. There were no policemen, no social workers, no compulsory education. In order to survive, such a person quickly had to find an alternative family or community. Boys and girls who ran away from home could expect at best to become servants in some new family. At worst, they were the army or the brothel. A business where sex work is conducted in exchange for money. Place where people pay to. People pay to engage in sexual activities. Okay, all this changed dramatically over the last 2 centuries. The Industrial Revolution gave the market immense new powers, provided the state with new means of communication and transportation, and placed at the government disposal any army of clerks, teachers, policemen, and social workers. At first, the market and the state discovered that they path blocked by traditional families and communities who had little love for outside intervention. Parents and community elders were reluctant to let the younger generation to be indoctrinated by nationalist education system, conscripted into armies or turned into a ruthless urban pro- proletariat. Proletariat. Proletariat means citizens, right? Working class people who don't own the means of production but sell their goods to survive. Working class people. Over time, states and markets use their growing power to weaken the traditional bonds of family and community. The state sends its policemen to stop family vendettas and replace them with court's decision. The market sends its hawkers to wipe out long-standing local tradition and replace them with ever-changing commercial fashions. Yet, this was not enough. In order really to break the power of family and community, they need the help of fifth column. They needed the help of a fifth column. The state and the market approached people with an offer that could not be refused. Become individuals, they said. Marry whomever you desire without asking permission from your parents. Take up whatever job suits you, even if community aid is strong. Live wherever you wish, even if you cannot make it every week to your family dinner. You are no longer dependent on your family or on your community. We, the state and the market will take care of you. State will provide food, shelter, educational, welfare and employment. Will provide pension, insurance and protection. Okay, it's not, it's uncommon. It's uncommon in India, right? Middle slash low middle class thinking. Romantic literature often presents the individual as somebody caught in struggle against the state and the market. Nothing could be further from the truth. The state and the market are the mother and the father of individual, and the individual can serve only the things to them. The market provides us with work, insurance, and pension. And if you want to study a profession, the government schools are there to teach us. If you wanted to open a business, the bank loans us, gives us money. If you want to build a house, the construction company builds it and the bank gives us a mortgage. In some cases, subsidized or insured by the state. If violence flares up, the police protects us. If we are sick for a few days, our health insurance takes care of us. If we are uh, debilitated for months, social security steps in. We need around the clock assistance. We can go to the market and hire a nurse, usually some stranger from the other side of the world, who takes care of us with the kind of devotion that no longer accepts from our own children. Debilitated for months means very sick, very sick for, or very sick, physically weakened. Okay. If we have if we have the means, we can spend our golden years at a senior citizen's home. The tax authorities teach us as individuals and do not expect us to pay the neighbor's taxes. The courts do see us as an individual and never punish us for the crimes of our cousins. Not only adult men, but also women and children are recognized as individuals. Throughout most of history, women were often seen as the property of family or community. Modern states, on the other hand, see women as individuals enjoying economic and legal rights independently of their family and community. They may hold their own bank accounts, decide whom to marry, and even choose to divorce or live on their own. But the liberation of the individual comes at the cost. Many of now bewail the loss of strong families. Bewail bewail the loss of strong families and communities and feel alienated and threatened by the power the impersonal state and market wield over us life. Complain to express deep sorrow, dramatic way. The more states and markets composed of alienated individuals can intervene in the lives of their members such much more easily than states and market composed of strong families and communities. When neighbors in a high-rise apartment building cannot even agree on how much to pay their janitor, how can we expect them to resist the state? The deal between state, market, and individual is an uneasy one. The state and the market disagree about their mutual rights and obligations. The individual complains that both demand too much and provide too little. In many cases, individuals are exploited by markets and states employ their armies, police forces, and bureaucracies to prosecute persecute individuals instead of defending them. Yet it is for amazing that this deal works at all, however imperfectly. For it reaches countless generation of human social arrangements, millions of years of evolution have begun us to live and think as community members. Within a mere 2 centuries, we have become alienated individuals. That testifies better to the awesome part of culture. The nuclear family did not disappear completely from the modern landscape. When streets and markets took from the family most of its economic and political roles, they left it some important emotional functions. The modern family is still supposed to provide for intimate needs, which state and the market are incapable of providing. Yet even here, the family is subject to increasing interventions. The market shapes to an even greater degree than the way people conduct their romantic and sexual lives. Whereas traditionally, the family was the main matchmaker. Today, it's the market that tailors our romantic and sexual preferences and then lend a hand in providing for them for a fair fee. Previously, bride and groom met in the family living room and money passed from the hands of the one father to another. Today, courting is done at bars and cafes. The money passes from hand of lover to waitresses. Even more money is transferred to the bank accounts of fashion designers, gym managers, dietitians, cosmeticians, cosmetic, cosmeticans and plastic surgeons who help us arrive at the cafe looking as similar as possible to the market's ideal beauty of beauty. The state to keeps a sharper eye on the family relations, especially between parents and children. Parents are obliged to send their children to be educated by the state. Parents who are especially abusive or violent with their children may be restrained by the state. If need be, the state may even imprison the parents or transfer their children to the foster families. Until not long ago, the suggestion that the state ought to prevent parents from beating or humiliating their children would have been rejected out of hand as ridiculous and unworkable. And most ridiculous means lazy, right? Ridiculous. L-U-D-I-C-R-O-S. Ridiculous means lazy, right? Weak. Foolish. Absurd. Okay. In most societies, parental authority was sacred. Respect of and obedience to one's parent were among the most followed values, and parents would do almost anything they wanted, including killing newborn babies, selling children into slavery, and marrying off daughters of men who more than twice their age. Today, parental authority is in full retreat. Youngsters are increasingly excused from obeying their elders, whereas parents are blamed for anything that goes wrong in the life of the child. Mom and dad are about as likely to get off in the Freudian courtroom as were defendants in the Stalinist show trial. Now, the next topic is imagined communities. Like the nuclear family, the community could not completely disappear from our world without any emotional replacement. Markets and states today provide most of the material needs once provided by communities, but they must also supply tribal bonds. Markets and states do so by fostering imagined communities that contain millions of strangers and which are tailored to national and commercial needs. An imagined community is a community of people who don't really know each other but imagine that they do. Such communities are not a novel invention. Kingdoms, empires, and churches function for millennia as imagined communities. In ancient China, 10 of million of people show themselves as members of a single family, with the emperor as its father. In the Middle Ages, millions of devout Muslims imagined that they were all brothers and sisters in the great community of Islam. Yet, throughout history, such imagined communities played second fiddle to intimate communities of several dozen people who knew each other well. The intimate communities fulfilled the emotional needs of their members and were essential for everyone's survival and welfare. In the last 2 centuries, the intimate communities have withered, living imagined communities to fill an emotional vacuum. Withered. Withered means mm, botanical, physical condition, or wasted, dried up, right? The two most important examples for the rise of the such imagined communities are the nation and the consumer tribe. The nation is the imagined community of the state. The consumer tribe is the imagined community of the market. Both are imagined communities because it is impossible for all customers in the market and for all members of the nation really to know one another the way villages knew one another in the past. No German can intimately know the other 80 million members of the German nation or the other 500 million customers inhabiting the European common market, which involved forced into the European community and finally became the European Union. Consumerism and the nationalism work extra hard to make us imagine that millions of strangers belong to the same community as ourselves, that we all have a common past, common interest, and a common future. This isn't a lie, it's imagination. Like money, limited liability companies, and human rights, nations and consumer tribes are inter-subject to reality. They exist only in our collective imagination, yet their power is immense. As long as millions of German believes in the existence of a German nation, yet excited at the sight of German national symbol, you tell German national myths and are willing to sacrifice money, time and lunch for the German nation, Germany will be remain one of the strongest powers in the world. The nation does its best to hide its imagined characters. Most nations argue that they are natural and eternal entity created in some primordial epoch by mixing the soil of the motherland with the blood of people. Yet such claims are usually exaggerated. Nations existed in the distant past, but their importance was much smaller than today because the importance of the state was much smaller. A resident of medieval Nuremberg might have felt some loyalty towards the German nation, but she felt for more loyalty towards her family and local community, which took care of most of her needs. Moreover, whatever importance ancient nations may have had, few of them survived. Many of today's nations coalesced only in the last uh, few centuries. Coalesce means uh, formed, right? And then come together, okay? Merge. The Middle East provides ample example. The Syrian, Lebanese, Jordan, and Iraqi nations were the product of haphazard borders drawn in the sand by French and British diplomats who ignored local history, geography, and economy. These diplomats determined in 1918 that the people of Kurdistan, Baghdad, and Basra would henceforth be Iraqis. It was primarily the French who decided who would be Syrian and who Lebanese. Saddam Hussein and Hafez al-Assad tried their best to promote and reinforce their Anglo Anglo-French manufactured national consciousness, but their bombastic speeches about allegedly eternal Iraqi and Syrian nation had a following. It goes without saying that nation cannot be created from thin air. Those who worked hard to construct Iraq or Syria made use of real historical, geographical, and cultural raw material, some of which are centuries and millennia old. Saddam Hussein co-opted the heritage of Abbasid Caliphate and the Babylonian Empire, even calling one of his crack armored units of Amirabi division. Yet, that does not turn the Iraqi nation into Asian entity. If I bake a cake from flour, oil, and sugar, all of which have been sitting in my pantry for the past 2 months, doesn't mean that the cake itself is 2 months old. In the battle for human loyalty, national communities have to compete with the tribes of customers. People who do not know People who do not know one another intimately but share the same consumption habits and interests often feel part of the same consumer tribe and define themselves as such. Madonna fans, for example, constitute a consumer tribe. They define themselves largely by shopping. They buy Madonna concert tickets, CDs, posters, shirts, and ringtones, and thereby define who they are. Manchester United fans, vegetarian and environmentalists are another example. Though few people are willing to die for the environment or for the Manchester United, but most people nowadays spend far more time in the supermarket than on the battlefields, and in the supermarket, the consumer tribe is often mightier than the nation. Okay. Okay. Now, perpetuum mobile. Okay, let's read another new topic, which is perpetuum mobile. The revolution of the last 2 centuries have been so swift and radical that they have changed the most fundamental characteristic of our social order. Traditionally, the social order was hard and rigid. Order implied stability and continuity. Swift social revolution were exceptional, and most social transformation resulted from the accumulation of numerous small steps. Humans tended to assume that the social structure was inflexible, and eternal families and communities might struggle to change their place in the order. But the idea that you could change the fundamental structure of the order was alien. People tended to reconcile themselves to the status quo, declaring that this is how it always was, and this is how it always will be. This is how it always was. Over the last 2 centuries, the pace of change became so quick that the social order acquired a dynamic and malleable nature. It now exists in a state of permanent flux. When you speak of modern revolution, we tend to think of 1789, the French Revolution 1848, the Liberal Revolution in 1917, the Russian Revolution, but fact is that these days every year is a revolutionary. Today, even a 30-year-old can honestly tell disbelieving teenagers when I was young, the world was completely different. The internet, for example, came into the wide use only in early 1990s, hardly 20 years ago. Today, we cannot imagine the world without it. Hence, any attempt to define the characteristics of modern society is akin to defining the color of a chameleon. The only characteristic of which we can be certain is incessant change. Incessant, incessant change. Incessant means something different. Okay, continuous. People have become used to this, and most of us think about the social order as something flexible, which we can engineer and improve it well. The main promise of pre-modern rulers was to safeguard the traditional order or even to go back to some lost golden age. In the last 2 centuries, the currency of politics is that it promises to destroy the old world and build a better one in its place. Not even the most conservative of political parties was made to keep things as they are. Everybody promises social reform, social educational reform, economic reform, and they often fulfill their promises. Just as geologists expect that tectonic movements will result in earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, so might we accept that drastic social movement will result in bloody outbursts of violence. The political history of the 19th and the 20th century is often told as a series of deadly wars, holocausts, and revolutions. Like a child in new boot leaping from puddle to puddle, this view sees this view sees history as leapfrogging from one world war to the next, from the First World War to the Second World War to the Cold War, from the American genocide to the Jewish genocide to the Rwandan genocide, or from Robespierre to Lenin to Hitler. There is truth here, but this all too familiar list of calamities is somewhat misleading. We focus too much on the puddles and forget about the dry land spreading them. The late modern era has seen unprecedented levels not only of violence and order but also of peace and tranquility. Charles Dickens wrote on the French Revolution that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. This may be not true only on the French Revolution but of the entire era is heralded, 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 heralded. Okay, to be sign of something to come, to publicly praise, announced, right, announced, proclaimed. Oh, rewarded. It is especially true of 7 decades that have elapsed since the end of the Second World War. During this period, humankind has for the first time faced the possibility of compare self-annihilation and has experienced a fair number of actual wars and genocides. Yet these decades were also the most peaceful era in human history and by a wide margin. This is surprising because these were decades experienced more economic, social and political change than any previous era. The tectonic plates of history are moving at a frantic pace, but the volcanoes are mostly silent. The new elastic order seem to be able to contain and even initiate radical structural change without collapsing into violent conflict. Okay, let's study one more topic, which is peace in our time. Most people don't appreciate just how peaceful an era we live in. None of us was alive 1,000 years ago, so we easily forget how much more violent the world used to be. And as war became more rare, they attract more attention. Many more people think about the war raging today in Afghanistan and Iraq than about the peace in which most Brazilians and Indians live. Even more importantly, it's easy to relate to the suffering of individual than of the entire population. However, in order to understand macro-historical process, we need to examine mass statistics rather than individual stories. In the year 2000, wars caused the deaths of 310,000 individuals and violent crime killed another 520,000. Each and every victim is a world destroyed, a family ruined, friends and relatives scared of for life. Yet, from a macro perspective, these 830,000 victims comprise only 1.5% of the 656 million people who died in 2000. Yet, that year, 1.26 million died in car accidents. 2.25% of total mortality, and 815,000 people committed suicide, 1.4%. The figure for 2002 are more surprising. Out of 57 million, that only 172,000 people died in the war, and 569 died of violent crime. Okay, in contrast, the committed suicide. It turned out that the last year was 9 of 11 attacks. Despite all the talks of terrorism and war, the average person was more likely to kill himself than to be killed by a terrorist, a soldier, or a drug dealer. In most parts of the world, people go to sleep without fearing that in the middle of the night an American tribe would march around that village and slaughter everyone. Well off, British subjects traveled daily from Nottingham to London through Sherwood Forest without fear that a gang of merry green clad brigades and will ambush them and take their money to kill the poor. Will ambush them, right? Ambush. Meaning of ambush is referring to surprise attack. The students broke no cannings from their teachers. Children need not fear that they will be sold into slavery when their parents can't pay their bills, and women know that the law forbids their husband from beating them and forcing them to stay at home. Increasingly around the world, these expectations are fulfilled. The decline of violence is due largely due to the rise of state. Third history, most violence resulted from local force between families and communities. Even today, as above figure indicate, local crime is far less deadlier threat than international wars. As we have seen, early farmers who knew no political organizations larger than local community suffered rampant violence. As kingdoms and empires became stronger, they reigned in communities and the level of violence decreased. In the decentralized kingdoms of medieval Europe, about 20 to 40 people were murdered each year for every 10,000, for every 100,000 invites. In recent decades, when states and markets have become all powerful and communities have vanished, violence rates have dropped even further. Today, the global average is only 9 murders a year per 100,000 people, and most of these murders take place in a weak state such as Somalia or Colombia. In the centralized state of Europe, the average is 1 murder per year, and these are certainly cases where states use this power to kill their own citizens, and these often doom large memories and fears. During the 20th century, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, people were killed by security forces of their own states. Still, from a macro perspective, state-run squads and police forces have probably increased the level of security worldwide. Even in oppressive dictatorship, the average modern person is far less likely to die at the hands of another person than in pre-modern societies. In 1964, a military dictatorship was established in Brazil. It ruled the country until 1985. During these 20 years, 7,000 Brazilians were murdered by the regime. Thousands more were imprisoned and tortured. Yet, even in the worst years, the average Brazilian in Rio de Janeiro was far less likely to die at human hands than the average Varori, Arodi, or Yamano. The Varori, Arawati, and Yanomano are indigenous people who live in the depths of Amazon rainforest. Without army, police, prisons, anthropological studies have indicated that between a quarter and a half of the menfolk die sooner or later in violent conflicts over property, women, or prestige. Okay, so yeah, now we are done with this topic, and we'll again read from, or I should read these three. Okay, no. So thank you so much for reading joining me, and now we'll just revise these vocabularies. So yeah, let's let's revise all the vocabs learned today, right? Therefore, you should remember these vocabulary, and you should know how to use these in different type of daily uses and sentences and advanced themes. Decadent, luxuriously indulgent or in moral decline. A decadent desert topped with cold flakes. Extravagant, exclusively lavish. He threw an extravagant party on a weekend to destroy or nullify completely, annihilate. The comet could annihilate life. Tenacious, persistent, determined. Her tenacious spirit kept her moving forward. Creeper, to disturb or cause some ease. His airy smile really creeped me out. Impervious, not affected. She is impervious to criticism. Impervious. imperishable or penetrable, right? Impenetrable. Unpredictable forces of actions, whims of nature. The flood was a cruel whim of nature, something causing annoyance or trouble. Nuance. The constant barking was a real nuance. Ubiquitous, found or seen anywhere. Wi-Fi is now ubiquitous in urban areas, right? Yeah. To see it, to surrender or yield possession. They could ceded the island after the treaty, right? Brothel, a place for commercial sexual activity. The district was dotted with old brothels. Proletariat, working class people without property. The proletarian sought justice through revolution. Debilitated, severely weakened or drained. She was debilitated after the operation, or she has been debilitated for 3 months. Bewail to lament or deeply regret. He bewailed the loss of his youth. He deeply regret about his youth, right? Withered, shrunken, dried. The bucket has withered in the sun. Coalesce, merged or united into one whole. The ideas coalesced into a single concept. Non-stop, insistent, relentless. The incessant buzz was maddening, or the incessant buzz was nuance for me, right? Her- heralded. Public announcers signaled the arrival. The reforms were heralded as a new beginning. Ambush, sudden surprise attack. They were caught in an ambush at dawn, right? Okay. Thank you so much. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel, My Fluency Journey. Thank you so much. We will meet soon and we will continue the live reading session.